Assalamualaikum and a very good evening to Sir Wan Aimran. He's a lecturer of Universiti Kebangsaan Malaysia in the Physics Department in Faculty of Science and Technology. And I would like to introduce him to you all. And Sir Wan Aimran, can you give us a brief explanation of your journey and work maybe?
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Aiman, for inviting me to this podcast. So, I'm a lecturer at the Department of Applied Physics, Faculty of Science and Technology, Universiti Kebangsaan Malaysia. I did my degree in physics at Imperial College London, and then I continued with my masters in astrophysics at University College London. And then I'm currently doing my PhD at the Centre for Advanced Studies, CASIS UTM KL. So I have served as lecturer at UKM since 2010. So I teach courses such as practical physics, modern physics, what else? Astronomy. I also teach history and philosophy of science, ethics in science and technology. So basically that's what I do.
So the first thing first in this podcast, I would like to ask Sir Wan Aimran, what are the two books that you would like to share that you think that is meaningful to you?
Okay, so
maybe one or two.
Okay. Right, so the two books that I would like to share, the first one is Don't Start the Small Stuff for Teens by Richard Carlson. The second one is The Guide for the Perplexed, or A Guide for the Perplexed, I think, by Schumacher. These two books, the first book, Don't Start the Small Stuff for Teens, I read that when I was in lower secondary school. So that and it is one of those books that I keep returning to again and again. As for The Guide for the Perplexed, I read that at the end of my degree, I think when I was back in Malaysia. So that particular book is very interesting because it provided me with a framework, a map, so to speak, which allowed me to make sense of what I've learned, what I'm learning, because I learn physics, but at the same time I'm interested in history, philosophy, and then I have issues with religion. So that particular book, it gave me the tools to place each one of these things in their proper places, which and that was very helpful to me. So the first book was very helpful, I guess, psychologically. The second book was very helpful intellectually. Yeah. So.
I thought an interesting maybe phrase or word that Sir just mentioned, which is the book kind of shaped the Aimran framework of living or thinking, maybe, if I may assume. So what can you explain a bit about what kind of framework do you like to actually convey? Actually tells us.
So let me just start with the first book, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. At least the thing that stuck with me from that book. I think the most important lesson that I get from that book is the realization that even though many things happen to you on a daily basis, you meet people and then you have to deal with stuff that you like, you don't like, and all this kind of thing. But at the end of the day, we have even though we cannot control what things happen to us, but we can control how we respond to those things. So I think that book was very crucial in the sense that it empowered me psychologically, I suppose. It it taught me that I don't have to, that I can maintain a certain distance from my emotions. I.e., if let's say today a lousy thing happened to me, yeah, and then that with that book, I was able to realize that, well, the lousy thing happened to me, and it is lousy, but then I have a choice in how to respond to it. That's one. Two, even though one lousy thing may happen to me, but there are what 9 or 10 other good things or not so lousy things that happened to me as well today. So it gave me a sense of perspective of not being caught up in the moment or not being caught up in a particular problem. And the book also taught me that whatever bad things that happen to me, it will come to an end. You that gives you the motivation to sort of just get through it. Whatever bad things that happen to you, it will not last forever, and you can get out of it. So that book was very was crucial in that sense. It gave me the tools to deal with my emotions, so I'm not I'm not
Caught up. You don't caught up.
yeah, so that
Don't
I'm
get.
not subject to my emotions, right? Because I think sometimes for instance, I think you know this as well. Sometimes the way we perceive something can differ depending on the emotional state we are in, right? If you are hungry, for instance, whenever somebody asks us a question, we might we might want to get angry. But then if we were asked the same question when we are not hungry, for instance, or when we are in a better mood, we can deal with it in a different way. So
I guess that's why, I mean, normal people would usually ask,
mm,
are you in a better mood? Are you in a good mood before
yeah.
actually telling something?
Yeah, because in a way our mood is like a lens. I mean, and if we don't realize that we see the world through our mood sometimes, it is easy for us to think that the way the world is represented, the way the world is seen through our mood, to be the way the world really is. But sometimes that is not the case. Sometimes, you know, our our mood can distort what we see of others, of the things around us.
That's, I guess, it's very eye-opening in the sense of, for me as a youth, not all, uh, not all of my friends or youth that I would say will actually willing to accept that there are certain things that we can learn from someone in the way that how we think. What I mean by that is that certain of the people that I know, they would say that why would we follow someone way of thinking and opinion?
Mm,
But it's irony that they actually also follow and get caught up with certain influences online in how they dresses, in how they actually show their life, when that's actually not the truth at all. Many things happen in the influencers' life that actually not shown in their maybe Insta story or any other platform of social media.
yeah, yeah.
So when Sir actually like, tells us that tell me just now about this book actually influence maybe shape your way of thinking and dealing things emotionally and psychologically. That's is a very interesting statement to know
Mm.
for me as a youth.
I think there are 2 points there. I think the first one is that as a youth, you want to assert your identity. Either you are searching for identity, or and then you are trying to distinguish yourself from everybody else, or maybe you're trying to blend in. Either way, that's one thing. there's this search for a voice or search for identity. On the other hand, we are easily, like you said, maybe precisely because we are searching, whenever anything that caught our eye comes our way, we will instantly, we will instantly grab it. We don't, because we are in need of something to
Validation,
yeah, maybe, yeah, or maybe our
but
we maybe we think that we are not sure enough, we are not confident enough, we are not strong enough to assert our own original voice. Therefore, we have to sort of hitchhike. We sort of have to, speak our mind through somebody else, and by I think uh, we are trying to search for identity, but at the same time, you want to feel a sense of belonging, and those two tendencies sort of fight each other within ourselves. I think.
I think mm, if I may say this, it's actually uh, an improper mixture of those two things that you just mentioned, which is a sense of belonging and a sense of self, if I am correct, that had been distorted
Mm.
without a proper guidance or validation. I mean, a proper guidance or for a lack of better uh, word in my vocabulary framework, I guess, to actually give a person their own way of actually perceiving.
Mm.
I mean, it's like I said just now, it's very ironic that they would say, why do we have to follow this person in how they actually do certain things or how they deal with things, or I am different from him when somebody's get mad and then they would say he has way of dealing things that is different than mine.
Yeah.
But then when it comes to social media, we actually follow them and wanting the same things as
Yeah.
the influencers, the
Mm.
so-called influencers, if I may. So it's very ironic in the
Mm.
sense of, in that sense
Mm.
of, I mean, view lah.
Yeah, I think a point that we have to remember is that, of course, we can say that we can claim that we are not under anyone's influence. They're sort of free from influence. But I think the reality is that um, either I think all of us are always under the influence of something or someone. It's just a matter whether we admit it, whether we realize it or not. And I guess recognizing that we are under the influence of something, even though that something it might not be so exemplary or so good, is better than being in denial that we are under any influence at all. I mean, it's like the case of some scientists. They say that they don't like philosophy. They don't like philosophy. They don't do philosophy or science or that kind of thing. But by saying that they dislike philosophy or they don't need philosophy, that in itself is a philosophical statement. So it's not so much an issue of whether you need or you don't need philosophy, but what kind of philosophy are you embracing, whether consciously or subconsciously. And the better you realize that, or the earlier you recognize that, then the better you are um at having some kind of self-awareness, and gaining control of your thinking, of your thought.
Mm. For this first book, don't sweat over small stuff. Is that correct? Don't sweat
Yeah,
over.
don't sweat the small stuff for teens, I think.
Uh, does it actually maybe share in the authors or writers of point of view about how do we actually feel sorry for ourselves or actually allow ourselves to actually feel bad about something that in that is in us or a mistake that we did. do the book actually tells us about that? If I may ask. So,
I can't recall the entire book, but I think but what
I mean,
yeah.
I mean, throughout your experience reading that book,
Mm,
what do you get, or if you have an opinion after reading the book, after reading that book
mm,
about actually feeling sorry about ourselves
mm,
and actually admitting our mistake.
yeah. I think since the title of the book is "Don't Sweat the Small Stuff," so a lot of I mean each chapter in that book basically is gives advice on how not to sweat the small stuff, i.e., not to over not to blow things out of proportion, so to keep a sense of perspective, to always have the big picture, to not get carried away with our emotions, and I think if I can answer your question in a tangential way, I think I guess if one of the causes for us sweating the small stuff is because we get caught up or we get hung up with the mistakes that we have done and we cannot move on. So being able to not to say feel sorry, but being able to um be okay with your weaknesses, being okay with your mistakes, being okay with your errors. I think that is a big part of not sweating the small stuff as well. As in, um, sometimes feeling sorry for oneself can be a bit self-serving in a sense that it makes you feel, it makes you feel not say important, but
Narciss- Narcissistic.
it gives you something to
I mean,
think over.
I just threw that word because it comes across my mind.
Mm,
The line between feel sorry and for ourselves, and
mm,
when some people will actually be narcissistic, that they are so selfish and stuff.
yeah.
So when they actually do mistake, they don't actually admit it in the same way that I don't know if most or small portion of humans do,
Yeah.
because the world is so chaotic right now. I can't even know which is the norm and which is the non-norm, you know.
Yeah. I think there are two aspects to that. I think the first one is we must realize that as human beings we will make mistakes. So that's the first part. I.e., if we have this notion that I will never make mistakes, or whenever I do something it must be perfect the first time around. If sometimes we do have those kind of mindset in our in
Like,
our mind, I suppose, as if the first time we do our presentation, or it must be the perfect one, or the first time we write something it must be the perfect sentence, or the first time we answer a question it must be the perfect answer. But come on, no one
yeah,
learns like that. No one learns like that. And I think whenever we learn anything new, be it a skill or knowledge or sports, even yourself when when you do martial arts, nobody comes to the first class and immediately becomes a good a good martial arts student or a good fighter. Nobody does that. I mean, and I think if we realize that learning something takes time, that we will make mistakes throughout our learning process, I think that allows us to be much more accommodating to our mistakes. We don't feel so bad whenever we make a mistake. I mean, the issue is not so much not making mistakes, but what you do after you make those mistakes. I think that is one thing. The other aspect is that whenever we make mistakes, um, um, what we do with it after that, that is a more important thing than actually um, trying to avoid mistakes, or imagining that we can be mistake free, because imagining that our life will be error free, mistake free, that can be a source of frustration and stress as well, isn't it? Once we make peace with the fact that, well, we will make mistakes, and what is important is not that we make mistakes, but what we do after we make those mistakes. I think that can help us gain perspective and not and not be bogged down with our mistakes. We will see our mistakes as opportunities to sort of improve and learn something.
I agree with that. I just want to throw this out. I think there are two different perspectives on mistake-free life that
Mm,
is maybe that can be in a person way of thinking.
mm,
The first one is that uh, they are brought up in a way that they have been getting support and validation about they are that's okay for them to make mistake to a point that they are spoiled with it.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
not that they
Mm,
it's not that they will actually learn from it. They,
mm,
that makes them getting carried away
yeah.
about how do they actually see their mistake.
Mm,
And the second one is this is close to me, I guess. Uh, uh, the way of thinking about mistake-free life
mm,
that in a way that is instilled within oneself that
mm,
it's so bad for them to make a mistake that they are actually worried about making a mistake and they don't actually pursue anything, or actually they are getting too carried away with the worry and just leave uh, everything behind and just take uh, a certain route of not to say easy, but then that comes to mind for them to actually be very uh, less stressful in
mm.
a way that they don't actually pursue anything on based on what they actually want.
Mm. I think there are two. Yeah, I think what you said is true. On the first case, in the first case that you mentioned, um, some people they they are not accountable for their mistakes, or they don't try to be accountable for their mistakes. Like what you said, they go on and on, making mistakes and not learning anything from it because they don't have to be accountable for it. And I think this is quite common amongst our students, in the sense that sometimes students get caught cheating, or students get caught copying answers, or not doing their part in a group assignment, but then they are able to escape from it. They are not to say punished, but then they are not held accountable for it. And if that continues, then it becomes more and more difficult to hold them accountable. So that's the first case lah. The second case is the other extreme, in the sense that they are so afraid of making mistakes that they don't they are afraid of learning anything, and so they remain in their comfort zone. So in the first case, they are too blasé, they are too you know couldn't care less. Whereas the second case, they are too scared that they become paralyzed and don't do anything. And so to avoid.
Actually,
Mm,
the word that you just mentioned, I mean the phrase comfort zone, I think for the latter uh, group of people, they they are not actually in their comfort zone. They are actually in a zone where they don't actually they don't need to actually uh, confront anything
mm,
uh, because maybe most of them would be brought up in the way that they need to actually follow what people say,
mm,
and if things go wrong when they do actually choose their own path or they make their own choices,
mm,
and their choice or path is really condemned to an extent where they don't actually believe that they are capable of anything.
mm. that I mean yeah it's in a way if we can if you want to summarize what a university education should be, one way to summarize it is to say that university is where you you should be free to make mistakes and to learn from your mistakes. I think if there's one lesson that a student should get from university, is that they should take the opportunity to make as many mistakes or to learn from as much mistakes as possible at university level, because once you have once you have graduated and you have a family and you have people to support you, you can't afford to make mistakes, such big mistakes anymore. So um, so if one wishes to make a mistake, not one wishes, but preferably, the university is a safe space where it is okay for you to stumble, it's okay for you to make mistakes, but you grow and you learn from it.
I kind of hopeful of that way of
But
education.
yeah, but then I don't think many students see it that way. I think students don't see university as a training ground for life. I think I'm not, sometimes I'm not sure how students perceive university education, but then, um, because one thing I get from my student is that they seem to be in a hurry to finish their university education. Sometimes they're in their first year and they're already talking about what they want to work as, their job prospects. And I was like, come on, you just entered university, yeah, and you're not even sure the job that you think is here today will be the same 3 years or 4 years later in the future. That kind of urgency, that sense of as if you want to get it done as soon as possible. I don't know, I find that very 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 not say annoying, but it becomes very difficult to teach students like that, because they will always measure what you have to teach in terms of, oh, can this thing that I'm learning be useful for me for my future job, that kind of thing. Whereas you're not even sure what you work as. So the right strategy would be to learn as much as possible, as broad as possible, and master them as good as possible, so that whatever happens in 3 or 4 years time, you can make something out of it, right? But yeah, but few students have that sense of I want to explore or I want to experiment. Maybe yeah.
I think what Sir Amran just said is actually really true, but there is an extent to that where there is a limitation to that statement where the university itself uh, is kind of limiting uh, the student numbers of choice to actually mix things up. What I mean by that is actually I actually read from one of my friends' statement that he told someone why he choose to study in America is because America is really liberated uh, to the extent of their education as well, where the university allows students to actually took any classes that they want, doesn't matter from which faculty it is. Where in British or in England and or United Kingdom, the class is very strict and the path of the course or program is very strict, and the choices of class that they can take is very strict. And I think the our university is kind of like that, like in United Kingdom.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, um, I think it has to do with the culture as well. But in the sense that I think, look at UKM. Even though students have the choice to sort of take courses from other faculties, which you try and all this, but then in the end, their choice of subjects will either be subjects they can score, or subjects they don't have to do much work for, or subjects which which just their friends are taking, or subjects which is taught by a lecturer that they like. So in the end, even though sometimes I think our students, even though we give them the choice, but then because in their mind, their studying at university is not so much about enriching themselves. It's not about gaining enriching themselves in terms of experience or knowledge, but more of trying to get through it as quickly as possible. So once you have that mindset, then it doesn't matter whether you give a choice of 100 courses or 10 courses. Eventually, students will choose courses which make life easy for them. That kind of mindset, right? I mean, we can see this with our students. How I mean, given the choice, how many among your classmates will take, for instance, history and philosophy of science? Maybe not much. It just so happens that the biology program, for some unknown reason, they make this compulsory for all biology students. But if that course is not made compulsory, how many will take it out of their own interest?
Sir, can you repeat the question? How many?
How many biology students will take the history and philosophy of science subject if it is not made compulsory by the program? And so yeah.
I think the statement that Sir Amran has said is actually really true in a way that our current university and education system really shapes our future generation.
I mean, in a way, we need to remember that our students have gone through an education system for what, 6 or 7 years, in which they are taught that, in which certain values have been imbued in them. Values such as, doing science or taking science courses is better than taking humanities courses, or science students are better than humanities. For 6 or 7 years, they have been inculcated with these values. So we can't expect these sort of students, once they enter university, suddenly they want to take, philosophy course or history course or arts course or political science course, because for the past 7 or 6 years, they have been told that there is only one course that is worth taking, and that is a science course, and all the other courses about history, philosophy, ethics, religion, even these are just not say unimportant, but these courses are not uh, will not help them to advance in life, right? So when we are dealing with students with those values, it is not surprising if they don't see the value in taking, other courses apart from, what they're specializing in.
I think that kind of um, thoughts and perspective from a lecturer like Sir Amran is actually really useful to actually, if it is to be used to build a framework itself for the education system, that would be a really something big, for the education system.
I mean, ultimately, when we talk about what kind of education should our universities give to their students, we need to ask what kind of students do we want to produce, right? Do we want to produce students who will become efficient workers? If that is our goal, then certain courses are not important. Certain courses are more important, and I'm not saying that universities cannot aim for that. There's no problem if universities want to aim for that, but they should do it seriously. in a sense that, for instance, if UKM really wants to go for producing efficient workers that can work at world-class companies, then there's no need to teach certain courses. There's no need to teach Bahasa Melayu. There's no you just teach the things that industry want, and you don't UKM does not need to pretend that it is a national university and have the interest of the rakyat at heart. You don't have to make pretenses like that. You just think of yourself as like Harvard and just focus on business. But the problem is when the universities try to do so many things. You try to serve the community, so you teach them this. You try to become entrepreneurs, so you teach them SESMED, or you try to a lot of problems in our university can be solved if our administrators make up their mind what is it that they want to produce actually, and just focus on that. But it seems like we want to have everything, a bit of everything, and the students we produce have no clear identity, I think.
Yes, I think the last statement that Sir just said is actually what I want to actually tell you right now. The lack of identity, when, in my opinion, this current education route that I am in the system that the university laid out for me throughout my 4 years, it actually doesn't help me in any at the significant level of everything that they are trying to give us. For example, in business knowledge, or in another area of knowledge, they are actually trying, I don't know, maybe trying to just introduce us, but in a way, how do introducing the students to a certain area
Yeah.
by just maybe giving a drop of it
Mm.
would be useful for them in the future.
Yeah. I think if we, I was discussing this with a friend yesterday about, for instance, if you take SESMED, the entrepreneur course at UKM, it is not the case that other universities don't have entrepreneurial courses. Other universities also have entrepreneurial courses, but at other universities, the entrepreneurial courses are confined just to the faculty of economics and business. So it is they who handle all these kind of things. And if students, let's say from the science faculty, are interested to become entrepreneur, then they go to the faculty of economics and business to actually learn all these kind of things. What is happening what has happened at UKM is that something that should be confined to just one faculty, and somehow becomes it has spread to all other faculties. It has spread its tentacles to all the faculties, and somehow all of us are entangled in it. And the lecturers that are summoned to teach these courses to our FST students, they are not entrepreneurs themselves, right? And I mean, we both of us are in the we are in science. We know that if you want to learn science, we will never learn it from someone who himself is not a scientist, right? We will never trust what that person said about science, and that is epistemology 101. If you want to trust someone, you make sure that he is someone from that field. But when it comes to SESMED, somehow bizarrely we entrust lecturers who themselves are not entrepreneurs to teach these courses to our students, which is it
It's funny.
it's funny, and it's tragic in a way, because students enter these courses thinking that they thinking that they will learn something, but at the end of the day, it is a joke. It is a joke, and we go along with it. So I'm not, so that is one example. Right? No one is saying that entrepreneurial stuff are not important. It is, for some people, it is important. But what we disagree with is this notion that everyone must learn it, and everyone must learn it at some superficial level, which is, what for, kan? Uh, we don't we don't think that that subject entrepreneur is that important that everyone must learn it. Um, uh, some courses might be that important that everyone has to learn it, like history, philosophy, ethics. It is something that everyone has to learn. And but entrepreneur, not. That is what happens when a field of knowledge or a branch of knowledge
I
that
think
is, yeah,
I think so it's not that it's not uh, that important, but it's not that important to actually force things out of unnecessary
yeah,
people, you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
even to the extent of asking lecturers who are not in the expertise in who are not in the field of expertise
mm,
in entrepreneurs
yeah,
have to teach entrepreneurs subject.
yeah, yeah. That is true. So, and when that happens, then everything, if of course, if you spend time, if you allocate time to teach these kind of courses, then you have less time to teach the actual, the sciences and the other things. So, um, that is one example. And then after that, after you have the entrepreneur, you have, along comes big data and science, data science, all this. So now students have to take analytic data, that kind of thing. So, and
I think it's okay to actually learn that kind of stuff
yeah,
and to actually go to FTSM if that's in UKM.
yeah,
And I think they are trying to actually simplify things too much
mm,
that it becomes actually uh, puzzling things for the student themselves.
yeah,
Oh, sorry, for the student to actually learn it
mm, mm,
because the university are asking the lecturers in certain field of expertise
mm,
to deliver something even if they know how to utilize it. They
yeah,
don't have the proper knowledge or they don't have the proper experience like the lecturers in FSM to
yeah,
actually teach big
mm,
data.
mm, yeah. It is. I think um, those people who promote these kind of things, whether it's entrepreneur or data science or 4IR or whatever, they have not made the case that these courses deserve to be general courses. They sort of assume that, oh, so just because the media is talking about it, just because the industry is talking about it, just because everyone is talking about it, therefore it's something that everyone must learn. But they have not made the argument. They have not argued why entrepreneur has to be learned by everyone, or or data science has to be learned by everyone, or 5R has to be learned by everyone. And even after they've made the argument, they need to they need to think. Okay, if they want to teach data science, then let's say there are 10 things in data science. Do they just want to teach the first two things, or do they want to teach, item number one, number three, number five, number seven? So they have to think, how what is it that they want to teach the student at the general level in these courses. And it is like if you want to teach someone how to taekwondo, for instance. Let's say there are 10 different moves in taekwondo, and five are offensive, five are defensive. And so if you want to teach taekwondo, taekwondo 101, introductory taekwondo, do you just want to teach the five defensive moves and not teach the offensive moves, or do you want to teach one offensive move and one defensive move? So you still have to think about these kind of things. What even after you make the argument that these courses deserve to be taught as a general course, you still have to show how, what aspect of that course do you want to introduce at the general level. If not, then like you said, it becomes very superficial. It is like you teach taekwondo, but you just teach the defensive moves, and then you send the student for a tournament, and then and then
Yeah.
so
They
so
got beaten up and then yeah. stuff happens.
So it is like that.
It, it is so ironic that right now everything is trying to be artificially intelligence, and then things become so superficial at the same time.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, when we're talking about, things, stuff that should be general, stuff that should be, the general knowledge and everything. Uh, just to link back to the second book, Guide for the Perplexed. This is one of the issues that that book addresses as well. We learn many kinds of knowledge throughout our life. So one of the nice things about that book is that it teaches you to place each of these kind of knowledge in their proper places. Some kind of knowledge are more important than others. So that book was useful in the sense that it tells you, not everything is equally important. Some things are more important, and we should plan our education in such a way that you don't just study something so specific, but at the same time you don't study something that is so general. So you need so that book teaches you, at least teaches me at least, how to balance between the general, the things that you should know generally and the things that you should know specifically, right? So that is a link lah to the to the second book.
Uh, so can you actually repeat the statement about the second book? That the book, what you just said, the book actually teaches or teaches us certain things. If I can't really remember.
Um, in a way, the title also is a guide for the perplexed. In a way, it's a philosophical book, in the sense that it teaches you how to think about things. And one of the things that in one of the chapter of the book, it talks about the different kinds of knowledge that we encounter in our daily life. Knowledge about ourselves, knowledge about other people, knowledge that we can acquire by observation, knowledge that we can acquire by thinking about things, the knowledge that we can um, inherently know. So just now we were discussing about whether entrepreneurial knowledge is important. Is it important enough to be taught to everyone? So that kind of question deals with uh, the issue of the the kind the relative importance of different kinds of knowledge. Some kind of knowledge is very important that everyone must know. Some kind of knowledge, it's not to say some kind of knowledge is less important, in the sense that not everyone has to know it, but then only maybe only certain people needs to know it. So uh, that particular book, the Guide for Perplexed, it 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 teaches the reader to weigh the relative importance of different kinds of knowledge, right? So that we don't think that, all we need to be happy is science, or all we need to be happy is mathematics, or all we need to be happy is business. That kind of very narrow-minded view. So that book provides the reader with a framework, with a map to place the different kinds of things that they know in life in their proper places, so that you will give something its proper due, so that you don't so that your life doesn't just revolve around science, or around business, so that you have a balanced way of thinking.
I think a phrase or a short paragraph that I like from the book A Guide for the Perplexed is it goes like this. Questions like what should I do or what must I do to be safe
Mm,
are strange questions
mm,
because they relate to ends, not simply to means.
mm,
So this sentence is actually really interesting to me because when I look at these two questions, they are asking to actually how do one actually solve things, but doesn't actually relate to any kind of learning process. I mean, if you put it into perspective, if you want to end certain problems and if you ask for a solution, then you would technically ask for the means to how to solve it.
Yeah.
But this book, it tells but this book it tells us that the kind of question that we ask would show how do we actually perceive uh, the respective things that we are referring to.
Yeah. In a way, like what you said, that book is asking us to pay attention um, to the to the answers about why we do something rather than how we do something. In that sense, that book, and I mean, we as scientists, we are very good, and we are very comfortable with asking how questions, right? How do we solve, or how do we create a vaccine for COVID-19? How do we, how do we distribute vaccine to everyone? How do we go to the moon? We are very good at answering this kind of question because, like you said, the end is already well defined. We want to create a vaccine. We want to go to the moon. What we are less good at as scientists is to ask ourselves, why should we go to the moon, or why should we create a vaccine when there are other, or why should we do something? That kind of question is something that scientists are not very often. We are not very comfortable with that kind of question because it is less well defined. Less well defined compared to how questions, right? um, we are as scientists, we are much more comfortable with uh, uh, problems that are well defined, clearly defined, and then we just find different ways to reach that goal rather than debating whether that goal is worth reaching in the first place or not, right? Philosophers are much more comfortable with asking, why do you want to do that? Why do you want to do this? Why do you want to, But then we as scientists, we just want to know, okay, you just tell me what to do. And I will tell you how to do it. We are much more comfortable with that sort of question.
But I think for a scientist, they if a scientist have at least the significant proportion of why they can really be they can really be a good scientist themselves. What I mean by that statement is that this book, I quote this book, the most important part of any inquiry or exploration is its beginning, as has often been pointed out. If one makes a false or superficial beginning, no matter how rigorous methods followed during the preceding investigation, they will never remedy the initial error.
Yeah.
Uh, and what I find interesting in this sentence or statement or short paragraph is that if a person, a scientist, or any human being actually have a why for themselves, they would actually know what they want to have with the ends
Yeah.
that they are reaching
Mm.
out to. For example, like there are many kind of COVID-19 vaccines,
Mm.
but the why on how the AstraZeneca from Oxford started out is
Yeah.
they want the why for them is to why do we create the vaccine? The answer is to actually make it really affordable for people worldwide.
Mm.
And that kind of questions
Yeah. Yes.
actually brought certain things that are really useful for them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think and when you're talking about the different kind of vaccine, now in the social media, the media, we have people, comparing the kind of vaccine that they get. You get Sinovac, I get AstraZeneca, you get Pfizer. Um, um, I think I have a friend of mine asked, what do I think about about people who compared a different kind of vaccine, and then I was like, um, uh, I've I've not any opinion about that yet, but then whenever when you're talking about the different kind of vaccine, why they were created, it struck me that we as somebody who knows science, both of us, and we know what vaccine is and whatever. The fact that you have different brands, it is important, but then it is not as important as it is not such a big deal that we have to sort of, as if one vaccine is 100 times better than the other vaccine. And we are able to have that sense of perspective because we have because we learn biology, we learn science, and we know uh, what differences are important and what differences are not important, right? I think that is another thing lah, that particular book teaches as well. I mean, uh, when you look at differences in terms of means or differences in terms of ends, right? We're talking about means and ends. Differences in ends, in terms of goal, that is much more important than differences in terms of, of means or how to do it, right? In the sense that if let's say both you and me wanted to go to Langkawi, for instance, so we share the same goal, but then we might differ in terms of, okay, do we take the bus or do we take the train or do we take the plane, right? But then at the very least our goal is the same, right? We just differ in
Yeah.
terms of means. But then let's say we differ in terms of goal. You want to go to Langkawi, I want to go to Johor Bahru, right? Um, if there's a difference at the level of goal, like a level of aim, even though we travel by car, by the same means, right? We are not going to arrive at the same destination. So
Yes.
I think we need to, in terms of the different brands of vaccine, I think we have to make the. I think the distinction that you said between means and ends is quite useful in this case. Right? What is our end game? What is our goal when we give out this vaccine? Is it is it to get as many people vaccinated as possible, or or if that is our goal, then whether you get Pfizer or AstraZeneca or Sinovac, it it, it shouldn't be a big deal lah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's the reason why certain people, even though they are vaccinated,
Mm,
the statement that they make or the statement that they share to their close ones or their friends
mm,
would actually sound so wrong
yeah.
that they like an easy example is they compare themselves
Mm,
between themselves and the other person
yeah. Mm,
vaccine. You
mm,
know, that kind of stuff actually shows how that person that why do they want to be vaccinated in the first place.
yeah. Mm,
So even to an extent they would actually compare
yeah.
what kind of vaccine they
Yeah.
want
So
or they want to get or they did get, you know.
yeah, I think for for both of us who are who not say who know science, and in your case, you know more about biology than I do, but then I think for both of us, the bigger problem is the difference between those who wants to be vaccinated and those who do not want to be vaccinated, rather than rather than the difference between, oh, whether you get Pfizer or AstraZeneca. To us, who knows the biology, who knows the science, for us that difference is not
That
that.
is that is so lovable, you know.
Yeah, it's trivial in that sense, right? It's like if you're hungry, if you're starving, it shouldn't matter whether you take Maggie or you take or you take Mummy. It shouldn't matter. You eat, kan? The same case here, I think. Yeah. But I think one can only make that judgment if one has knowledge, if one knows, what is.
And that
Yeah.
and this is where this book comes into play, you know.
Mm,
The Guide for the Perplexed.
mm,
This is a book that really fascinates me in the
yeah.
sense where I would I would be honest, if I am to be honest, this book
Mm,
is actually a deep book,
mm,
but the kind of the deep the deep level of this book actually worth it to be read,
mm.
and it's actually crucial for people to actually read it.
Mm. I mean, the other day I was discussing with a fellow, with a friend about industrial placement and finding a project latihan ilmiah latihan industri. Uh, Now with COVID and you can enter the lab, you cannot go to work and all this kind of thing. So it is a big problem. And I remember that in that book, Guide for the Perplexed, there was one chapter which Schumacher makes a distinction between open-ended problem and closed-ended problem, something like that. Converging problem or diverging problem. And then
Yeah, that
I think,
yeah, we did talk about that kind of stuff.
yeah. And then I realized that the question of how students can do research in times of COVID, because you can enter the lab, you cannot. That is, in a way, the first question I should ask myself is that whether this question, is it a diverging problem or is it a converging problem? If it's a converging problem, then it's just a matter of finding the means lah. Kan? But if it's a diverging problem, then we need to ask ourselves, well, should students even do research during times of COVID, or so it's a much more deeper question. And I find that distinction between diverging, converging problem, I find that a very useful tool to be used whenever I'm explaining this to my friends, because I explain to them first. Okay, not all problems are equal. Some problems we just we have not find the means, but some problems we have to sort of decide what are the ends. So uh, pedagogically, that distinction by Schumacher was very, is very useful. It's a very systematic way of tackling something.
I am really fascinated by what Sir just said just now. The converging problem or diverging problem, it is really useful for people nowadays to actually realize, if they know about this, the kind of solution that they actually pursue would be so different to
Hmm.
what maybe they are currently practicing or doing.
Yeah. I think I'm not sure where I read it, but I think it's from a history of science book. The person was saying that when you look at the history of science, certain inventions, before we have electricity, before we have electric lights, we have gas lamps, right? And then the person was saying that he was saying that, well, if the people at that time when they are using gas lamps, if all they think about is just improving the gas lamp, then we will never create the electric light, because electric light needs a completely different way of thinking about energy, thinking about lighting, right? If all we think about if research and development is just about improving what we already have, then we will not have electrical lighting, but we will have better and better forms of gas lighting. Because because the gap between a gas lamp and electric lamp is a big gap. It's a big gap because it requires different energy resources and whatnot. So um, it, it, if all we are content with is just making incremental changes, then we will forever be then we will never get out of the paradigm that we are in. And I thought that was such a such a wow moment when I read that particular statement.
Okay, sir. I think it's already late right
Yeah.
now, and I am really thankful for all the sharings that you did
Mm,
about the two books and about the information that you shared and the knowledge that you actually taught me.
mm,
And I hope uh, things get better
yeah.
for all of us, you know.
Mm,
And in a way, this kind of session, I think, is really useful for certain people to have. So I would say that I am looking forward to many kind of uh, situations or things or sessions
yeah.
like this to actually be an eye opener for other people.
I think yeah, I think sometimes in a pandemic like this we focus on the things that divide us. You know, we cannot be at the same physical location, we cannot meet each other, but on the other hand, things like this can also bring people who used to be apart together. And I think that is the other side of the pandemic that we should also bear in mind lah, I think.
Okay.
Mm.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much,
I'm
Ahmad.
gonna end this podcast. It's okay with you.
Yeah.
So I hope again I hope and I am thankful to all of the things that you shared and taught me, and I hope to actually learn more from you in the future. And I think that's all. And I'll end this session uh, and see you again. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Ahmad.